Hello, Meoni here, and welcome back to another discussion video. This time we're going to talk a little bit about the lore and all of the things surrounding the brand new raid series coming to Final Fantasy XIV's Endwalker expansion 6.0. Just as a preface, this does contain spoiler mentions, sort of references and speculation, so if you're not into anything that would spoil any characters from A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, then this is probably not something that you want to watch. Go and play through those particular parts of the game. They are fantastic. So with that said, let's talk about, well, first of all, Pandaemonium being the title, and of course, the actual image then that we actually have, the only image we have of the raid series so far, which is a picture of a gowned figure that has the same likeness, let's say, as Lahabrea. Now, Lahabrea is a character that we all know at this point, is presumed, and is very, very likely dead at this point in the Final Fantasy XIV storyline. The Pandaemonium logo then clearly shows Lahabrea's actual sigil, his what do you call that? His glyph that he has as an Ascian, but you'll also note something very specific about this artwork, okay? Just, ignore the text for a second and see that it's a flaming sigil, rather than just a normal one, and it only covers half of his face. This could potentially lead towards the idea of sundered versus unsundered Ascians, and perhaps this is Lahabrea, but not the Lahabrea we knew. Let me just refresh you. Basically, throughout Shadowbringers, it's been inferred that the title of an Ascian is actually Lahabrea, for example. We also had this with Nabriales, for example. These are basically the names, if you think about it laterally, of a position rather than the individual themselves. We have, certain exceptions to this, such as Emmett Selk, but there are titles as well. Like Elidibus is more of a title than it is actually of a person. So technically you could have another person wearing a similar robe and calling themselves Elidibus. You could have exactly the same situation with Lahabrea, which is what I personally speculate and believe as a prediction could be the factor here. So what are we expecting then from a raid series that fundamentally has Lahabrea as the title? Now, as we know, we're trying to deal with the Ascian and Hydaelyn and Zodiac plotline, and 6.0 is supposed to wrap itself up completely. Considering then that the raid series will be mimicking a lot of that, it's likely that we'll have a few loose ends tied up as to those particular titles, and maybe we'll see more of the sundered Ascians rather than just all of those unsundered that we have seen either perish due to Auracite or whatever, basically have fallen by other means that we've defeated, etc., as scions. So it stands to reason that there could be more of these sundered Ascians, not just Fandaniel, or perhaps Fandaniel will take the guise of this new Lahabrea. There's lots of speculation as to how many Ascians are left on the sundered side, how powerful they are, and this half a mask kind of illustrates, at least to me, in my opinion, that could be where we're going with that. Of course, this is all speculation. So just as a preface then, Lahabrea, the first time we really interact with Lahabrea in the main storyline, the first chunky section of that is where Lahabrea possesses Thancred's body. Now, in the particular image that I'm showing you here, you can see that it's a full glyph, okay? So we haven't got half a glyph here, we have a full glyph in front of Thancred's face because Lahabrea is possessing him, same as in other situations throughout that series. It was until Heavensward when we finally presumably saw the end of Lahabrea, the Lahabrea that we know anyway. Just as a little spoiler reference then, Thordan the Seventh basically becoming that of the God King, okay, as Thordan, the God King, in a primal form, basically used all of Lahabrea's etheric energy and absorbed it into him as a primal. That's how we saw Lahabrea actually die. So it's a very unconventional way of actually defeating an Ascian, and you wouldn't think that being absorbed into a primal necessarily would result in an Ascian's death. I could be completely wrong, but it also brings to light more recent information that we've played through the game, where we've realized that an Ascian actually has another form, a hidden form. For example, Emmett Selk had Hades as his hidden form. That was what he ultimately is, underneath the guise of a mortal. He is Hades, you know? So it stands to reason that La Habrea probably has a similar form. So the likelihood of La Habrea as an Ascian being absorbed into another primal and consumed that way and presumed dead might be a little bit far-fetched, and a lot of people have speculated if La Habrea is actually dead or if he's alive, and it's still honestly on the table. It's not something that people answer when questioned. I think Yoshi P was asked a few times, is La Habrea dead? I don't think a straight answer was ever given, so there's a good chance that either La Habrea, that we know, is still an existent form, or there is a sundered version of an Ascian that has taken up the mantle of La Habrea and is using that name. As to what the raid could potentially be, well, if we're going an Ascian-themed raid, that could be basically, if you remember the Convocation or the 14 seats, it could be set somewhere in that sort of void realm or whatever that was supposed to be. We more recently have seen what it looks like from space when we're looking down upon the Earth in the Amarot, right, the final days of Amarot. You know, we've noticed now we're going to the moon, so it makes sense then that it could potentially be on those floating purpley platform things. Maybe those do actually exist. Maybe there is, you know, an entire, you know, area where the Ascians hung out in space between Hydaelyn and the moon, where Zodiac is presumably still trapped, presumably still. So there'll be some kind of structure there. That's what I think. That's what I think the Convocation of the 14 room is actually located. I don't think it's in, you know, anywhere else in it, like a different place in space-time. I think it's a different part of, you know, actually orbiting somewhere above Hydaelyn itself. Again, just a theory, mostly based on the purple type of rocks that you see in those old cutscenes compared to what we saw at the end of Amarot and Hades in particular, where you look down upon the final days of Amarot. So what kind of bosses might we see in there? Well, Ascian-related creations, for example. La Habrea in particular. If you know anything about the lore recently, you'll notice that La Habrea was kind of in charge of the creation of all kinds of different creatures. We saw Quetzalcoatl, for example, in one of the dungeons. One of his creations, right? He was able to bring life to things. It was one of the duties of that particular role of the Ascians, right? He was experimenting with existence itself. So it's very likely then that somebody who is so proficient in creating life and, you know, all this might have actually used the absorption into Thordan as a primal as a good way of faking their own death and potentially staying behind the scenes. Or if La Habrea is truly dead, then we could be seeing some of his creations. Maybe it's just an image of, like, this is what's left over, all those horrible things that you can imagine, and maybe they are a threat to the world in Endwalker, perhaps. So I'm really excited to see what the raid entails, but I'm imagining all kinds of monstrosities, and it would be a great excuse to bring back some old Final Fantasy monsters that we haven't seen in the game so far. I mean, we've seen all manner of different beasties, from Cerberus, all sorts of things, and you have to understand that Final Fantasy XIV does like to rehash a lot of old bosses from old games, as, you know, things that we can fight in our game, and I don't think, apart from maybe a few of original ideas, I think that we'll have probably a creation series, maybe like the Ascians Experiments. That would be quite fun as a raid series. And then maybe a final confrontation with La Habrea as an Ascian Prime once again. That would be a kind of cool end to that raid series, and maybe his experiments. But that's all I can really speculate at the moment. I really just wanted to put this video out just so I could say I told you so in the future, or, oh, I was terribly wrong. But that's what I think the next raid series is going to be. We'll find out soon enough. I'm sure they are gagging to tell us more. And in the Fan Fest, the digital Fan Fest that's coming up in May, we should get answers to that. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Share your own speculation below. Am I completely wrong? I probably am. Do you want to correct some of my lore? Do you want to talk about the lore in further detail? I look forward to reading the comment section. You guys know so much more about this game than I do, and I'm always learning, and I'm always open to other ideas. Maybe we can piece it together. Much love. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all next time.